Hello, I think we are on Bookmas day 10. I've had to skip a couple days of uploading just because of life and different things going on, but I am still committed to doing my 12 days of Bookmas, so I'm so glad that you're here and I really appreciate it. I thought about what I was going to talk about today, and the other day I was thinking about a couple books that I really enjoyed, and I was like, I don't talk about those books enough, and I feel like not a lot of people know about them, and I don't hear many people praising them as they should be. So I wanted to talk about those books. All of these books are books that I've read this year. And so, like I said, they're books that I feel like deserve more love. And I want to talk about them because I just never seem to have a chance, or I never bring them up for some reason. So let's chat about it. And let's please ignore all the Christmas clutter that I have going on here. Obviously, this is a catch-all office type room, and I have a little kid, and so we have lots of Christmas stuff going on in the corner. Let's get started. The first book I wanted to talk about was Shiner, and this is by Amy Jo Burns. I actually read her book Mercury, which came out in the beginning of this year, and I loved it so much that I was like, what else has this author written? Because I had never heard of her before then. So I saw that she had a book that was more of a memoir style, and then this book, Shiner. I actually picked up this book first and absolutely loved it. It is very much the similar writing style as Mercury and kind of a similar story. I think this author really pulls from her childhood and her upbringing, and I think she grew up in kind of like rural Appalachia. So Shiner, and my summaries are probably going to be a little bit brief because there has been some time since I've read these books. This book is about a girl who is a teenager, and her father is he talks to snakes. Not Harry Potter Parseltongue, but he is kind of like I guess like a fortune teller, a snake like a wrangler. It just talks about a lot of myth making in this part of the country, and how a lot of these people in this part of the country are kind of like left to their own devices, and a lot of stuff goes on, and it's just kind of her trying to grow up and her discovering things about her family's past. So it's very interesting. It's called Shiner because of the term that they give people who make moonshine, I believe, in this part of the country. There's a really beautiful opening to this book, and it says, "Making good moonshine isn't that different from telling a good story, and no one tells a story like a woman. She knows that legends and liquor are best spun from the back of a pickup truck after nightfall, just as she knows to tell a story slowly, the way whiskey drips through a sieve. Moonshine earned its name from spending its life concealed in the dark, and no one understands that fate more than I do. Beyond these hills, my people are known for the kick in their liquor and the poverty in their hearts. Overdoses, opioids, unemployment, folks prefer us this way, dumb-mouthed with yellow teeth. And cigarettes, dumb-minded with carboys of whiskey and broken-backed Bibles. But that's not the real story. Here's what hides behind the beauty line along West Virginia's highways, a fear that God has forgotten us. We live in the wasteland that coal has built, where trains eat miles of track. Our men slip serpents through their fingers on Sunday mornings and pray for God to show himself, while our wives wash their husbands' underpants. Here's what hides behind my beauty line. My father wasn't just one of these men. He was the best." And then it continues on. But I think that is such a brilliant opening of a story. It really lays the foundation for where this story takes place and the people that live in these sorts of places. So it's just such beautiful writing. I think Amy Jo Burns can write so well and make her characters so relatable and so empathetic. So really love this one. I would definitely check it out. It's not a long read, and like I said, it's just full of beautiful language, but not in a way that it is obnoxious and hard to read. Next up, I have a trilogy actually. So Blake Crouch is a pretty popular sci-fi writer, and you've probably heard of his books Upgrade or Dark Matter or Recursion. Very, very big popular sci-fi books. But if you've read all those and you need more Blake Crouch like I did, I actually came across his trilogy. I think it's called the Wayward Pines trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, and it's 3 books. They're not very long. It starts with Pines, Wayward, and then The Last Town. So it's basically a trilogy about, and I can't give away too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but this man wakes up in this weird town and he can't reach anybody outside of this town. He can't get a hold of anybody from his life. He wakes up and is just totally lost and doesn't know what's going on. And then you come to find out like what this town is, why you can't leave this town, and this kind of thriller, action-packed mystery sci-fi story unfolds. And it is so quick-paced, so fast. You could probably get through this trilogy in like a week or two, if not faster. And it's just really fun. I really enjoyed it. I read all three this year. I picked up the first one, was like, I'll give it a try. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really fun. Read the next one. And I would say that all three of these books are pretty good on their own. Like, sometimes you get like a really weak one in a series, but I feel like all of these books had a focal point and a story to tell, and they all connected really well to each other. Obviously, they're a trilogy of one story, but like I said, there was no like super weak book in the bunch. So this was a really fun one if you like sci-fi, and this is a great series for anybody really. Next book I have to talk about is The Storm We Made, and this was a new release this year and also a debut novel for this author. So I hadn't read obviously anything from this author. I just had read the summary and thought it sounded really interesting. It was a Good Morning America pick, but I feel like it still wasn't that popular. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just don't listen to, or I'm not following the people that read this book, but I haven't really heard anybody talk about it. It is a historical fiction, so I know some people are like, ew, historical fiction. But if you have that attitude, I don't think you read the right historical fiction, because it opens up so many worlds. I think it's similar to fantasy, where you're going to so many different worlds that, and all these things that, you know, were possible at different times that are possible in that world. I don't know. That's a bad analogy. But anyways, if you're not reading historical fiction, I think you should give it another try, because I enjoy it a lot. This book is really beautifully written. There's so many pretty lines. When I read it, I wasn't tabbing, so I feel like I should go back and try to tab. I'd have to probably reread it, which maybe I should. I'm just not a big rereader because I have so many books on my TBR. First off, this book takes place during World War II, and it takes place in Malaya, I believe. I don't know if that is still a Malaya or if it has now been changed hands and is called something different. But this woman is living during World War II there. The Japanese are colonizing it with the British, and she kind of unwittingly becomes a spy for the enemy, which is the Japanese. She kind of gets involved in this whole thing because her husband is in the military and in politics, and the man that she's having a relationship knows this about her and uses this to kind of pull her in and get her to tell him secrets or what's going on. So she kind of unwittingly becomes involved in this. She doesn't really seek it out. And then years later, when she has her own family and the Japanese and British colonizers have kind of gotten more of a grasp on her country, and it has become worse for herself and the people that live there, she's kind of seeing it really affect her family and her children, just thinking of how she played a part in that colonization against her and her own people. It's really a story about how such little things in your life can create such big ripples for the rest of your life and for the people around you. This character is really, you feel really empathetic towards, really sympathetic for, and you just kind of watch her family start to dissolve and what she does to try to fix it. So it's a really great book. I think obviously that's where the title comes from, The Storm We Made, like how she kind of got involved and added to the horrible things that is happening to her home country. Read this one if you like historical fiction. Read it if you don't like historical fiction. Give it a try. It's beautifully written, and I am really looking forward to more from this author because I really liked her writing style, and I think similar to Amy Jo Burns, she writes really beautifully, but not beating you over the head with it, and not to a point where you feel like it's too prosy and it's not plot enough. So Really, really, really good book. The other couple books I have, I don't own physically, but the first book I want to talk about is called The Instrumentalist. And this was a book that I got as an ARC, and it is a historical fiction as well. I think it takes place in the 1700s, and it's about a young girl who's an orphan. I think she's like in her early teens, mid teens, and circumstance has it where she ends up figuring out that she has this innate musical ability to play the violin. And this very famous composer that's also a violinist finds this out, and he kind of takes her under his wing to mentor her. And he does a lot of, like, obviously private sessions with her, and they start to have this relationship that's really gray. And there's this power dynamic going on as well. And her success in violin is going to really matter in the success of her life, and if she's able to get out of the poverty that she is destined to be in as she gets older and ages out of the orphanage. So it's a really interesting take on that kind of like age gap, power gap dynamic. It's not super romantic, but there are definitely tones of them crossing the line, or what is this? And it's just really interesting in that aspect, just in like human interactions. But it also kind of follows her as she uses this skill to her advantage, and him kind of using it to his advantage too. And they're both kind of using each other to better their own situations, and they come to heads about it and know that they have to work together to get what they want, but they also, want different things. So it's really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I think I read it earlier in the year. I think it came out in like the summertime, if I'm not mistaken. So I just haven't seen a lot of people read it. So definitely give it a read if you like those kinds of stories. And it definitely kind of comes to a head, and there's more high stakes at the end, which is really fun to read. I've had to record this video so many times for how short it is, because either my camera overheats or my audio is not recording. So anyways, the last book that I want to talk about is Devil is Fine, and this was a new release this year. It was on one of my anticipated reads videos, and I actually picked it up and borrowed it from the library. This one is like a literary fiction with some magical realism. There's kind of a surrealistic quality to some of the things that happen as well. It's kind of one of those that kind of has a mix. I feel like you would like this if you liked Monstralia, if you kind of like that literary fiction that's dealing with some heavy themes, but there's kind of a magical realism quality that these themes are kind of setting loose into the world. This book is about a man whose son passes away, and his son is a teenager. So it's obviously a tragic passing. It was not expected. And he's kind of grappling with the grief from that. And he is kind of going back in his memories and thinking about all of the interactions that he had with his son and what he could have done differently. And he doesn't have a good relationship with his son when he passes. So this really haunts him, and how kind of his racial background and his childhood really affect how he's able to connect with his son. And this is also a book about race identity. Main character is mixed race. He's half black, half white, and how that really affected him. Through his son's passing, he actually inherits a plot of land and that he didn't know about, that was in his family. And this plot of land happens to be old plantation land where slaves worked it. And so obviously that causes a lot of internal turmoil about why his family has this, what he's supposed to do with this, how does he properly handle this sort of thing in today's world and with everything going on. And he kind of goes, the main story takes place with him going to this plot of land and trying to figure out what to do with it. And all of these weird magical realism manifestations start happening. You're trying to figure out what's real, what's not real. And it's just a really great story that grapples with a lot of really serious topics. And there's a little bit of unreliable narrator going on. You're not quite sure. He is a writer, so he is also writing about what's going on. So it's a little bit meta, where he's writing a book about this book that you're reading. It's a really interesting one. I don't think enough people have read it yet, but I think if more people read it, it'll kind of get some traction. And like I said, it's very similar to Monstrilio in the kind of tone and the way that the story unfolds. So And I know Monstrilio kind of found its audience and got really popular, but personally, I preferred this story over Monstrilio. So if you find any of that at all interesting, please check this book out. And I don't think I've read anything else from this author. I don't know if it was a debut, but it is not a long book and it packs a punch for sure. So those were the books that I wanted to talk about. Kind of right now where I'm at, I have read 95 books. So I think the last time I updated you, I was at like 94 when I did my short books video. So I finished the book I was in the middle of. Since then, I've read, I think, 4 books this month. So I'm tracking really well. I'm reading pretty quickly. I'm also reading, like I said, shorter books. I think that my goal of 100 is definitely in sight. I think if I can get to like my 99th book and have plenty of the month left, I might tackle one of the bigger books that was originally on my TBR that I was kind of scared to do if I have enough time. But if I'm still really eking by, I might just do all short books the rest of the year and then worry about those bigger books on my TBR for the beginning of the year. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. How is your reading going? Are you doing well towards your goal? I mean, goals are really just made up numbers. We really shouldn't feel any stress or pressure about it. I think I'm doing well so far, and I'm so excited to do kind of like the end of the year wrap up book videos and kind of see a good full picture of everything I've read. So thank you so much as always for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I have, after this video, I have 2 more Bookmas videos to do. I'm gonna do 12 days and be done, and then gonna focus towards those end of the year type wrap up videos. I think that this has gotten me in a good flow of filming, editing, and putting it out there. And I thank you so much for watching. So I'll see you in my next video.